Okay, it's recording. All right, cool. So, welcome to the Author Talk, hosted by me. My name's Allie with Kaleidoscope-Soul. Sorry if I'm not looking directly in the camera. I am so terrible at this. Um, but we are here today with Alyssa Romeo. She wrote The Heart of the Corsair right here. Um, so welcome to Alyssa. It's nice to have you here.
Thank
And I know we have some people joining online, and then this is also being recorded to be shared with whoever. So I just wanted to say, one, I love the book. Um, I mean, I think I kind of knew what it was about, like when I saw the title and when you had the cover, very like piratey. Um, so the name of the book, I actually looked up the word Corsair this morning, and Google says that it is a pirate or privateer, especially one operating in the Mediterranean from the Barbary Coast, North Africa, during historical periods, often with government sanction to attack enemy ships. But the term also refers to the ship themselves. And I was like, oh, did she know that it was both? Like, did you know
I
that?
did. I did. So, like you, I had to look up Corsair because I knew I had heard the term before, but I was like, okay, I know it at least means pirate. I didn't know the full terminology. So, when I was trying to think of a title, I did not want to put pirate on the cover. Just, I didn't think it was enticing enough. But Corsair, if you know what it is, you know there's multiple meanings. And if you want to know what type of individual we're talking about, you have to read the book, right? Is he a privateer or a pirate? And also, I liked the ring of Corsair. And so what I did was in the book, I when Lily escapes, and this is not a spoiler because it's literally on the back cover, the ship that she originally ends up on, I decided to make that the introductory point to tell people exactly who we're talking about when we're talking about Corsair. So when the captain of that ship, right, where the Savage Sea intercepts that ship, and he's looking through his spyglass, and his first mate says, when he says, "Oh, it's a Corsair ship," and the first mate says, "Privateer or pirate," I wanted that moment to be like, and then he says it. He says, "Does it effing matter?" But then says pirate when they realize it's the Savage Sea. So I wanted to give people this little moment of, oh, what's it going to be? Because when you think of a privateer, you think more on the side of government sanction. They're doing things for money, but on the pirate side, right, it's a bit darker. So that's why I went with Corsair to give it that little bit of an edge.
Nice. It seemed like almost like a kind of like a romance kind of word to me, like
Right. Yeah. So
in
it's
general.
French. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's French in origin, and so I liked that as well because French is such a romance language, and I just wanted to bring that side of it because of the genre the book is in.
Nice. In the dedications, you dedicate to your grandma or your nana. And I remember meeting her, and I was like reading that, I was like, I do. I remember her voice. Like obviously, like she wasn't my grandma, but I remember her voice anytime that I was in her presence, and it was very like calming. Like I could picture her telling stories.
And that's how she was my entire life. And so, I did a bit of a tribute video to her earlier. I can't say this year. I keep thinking it's 2025. Last year, I did a bit of a tribute video to her because we lost her September of 2024, and she didn't get to see this work finished. And, when I wrote my first two books in 2012, 2013, she knew about them, she read them, she loved them. But Corsair, I worked on and off for about 10 years, and in that 10-year time frame, and it wasn't until like early 2020s that I got serious about it. She had been diagnosed with very advanced Alzheimer's, and so I tried to tell her I was writing, and sometimes in the moment she acknowledged it and like a memory clicked for her. But other times it was more of that general, oh, that's nice. And so because she didn't get to see this come to fruition, I absolutely had to dedicate it to her because she was the greatest storyteller of my life that I remember. Bedtime stories, life stories, a quintessential grandmother, I'll say, telling us what it was like growing up, She worked in a school, so like she had that mind of like what children wanted to hear. And so that was a really big influence on me when it came to actually being able to write books.
Nice. Also in the beginning, you do mention all the way at the end, thanks to the libraries, obviously for obvious reasons, but do you have a library that you've been to that sticks out as like your favorite library, like school or town public libraries?
So the New York City Library would is the biggest one I've been to, but there are so many libraries around the world that I would love to see just because they are beautiful and I want to just sit there in the presence of books and just take them in. And I'm going to forget the name of it, but it's the Beauty and the Beast inspired library in Austria. I want to go there so badly, so badly, and just look around at how beautiful it is and all this knowledge that is filling the shelves. And yes, I part of the reason I included that dedication to the libraries is because they are what opened my eyes to the world of books. Since I was a child, we were always in the library, whether it was a public library or my school library. I was there, I was getting books, I was learning and enjoying. And without them, I wouldn't have the knowledge base that I have for being able to write. And there's a lot going on with libraries and the books that they have available now. And I just wanted to put it out there that I am so grateful for the libraries that have been in my life who gave me access to all of these wonderful stories.
Nice. I don't know if it's in Utah. Do you know what I'm talking about? There's one, it's like all glass, and I found it
Um,
in reading a book about I believe it's an autistic librarian, and I wrote it down like I need to go to Utah just to go to the library.
Gotcha. No, there's some absolutely beautifully, uniquely designed libraries around the world, which is why if I ever go to a place that has one, I want it to be on my list of things to see.
Um, Okay, so this I'm actually just going to double check before I say it. But in the beginning, which I appreciate, you have like the pronunciations of all the characters or some of the characters, but the one
And
character
so,
you don't. And I was like cursing you when I was reading. I was like, she doesn't have the pronunciation. I should have just asked you. Um, Staunton. I was like, I felt like I was saying his name wrong because it just sounded weird in my brain.
I could have sworn I put Staunton in there. Did I not? Rodrigo Smith. No, I didn't.
And
Okay, yeah. No,
I was like, this is so hard to pronounce.
and his name is said a lot. Oh, I am so sorry. Yeah, I guess in my mind I was like, it's Staunton. So you said it
Staunton.
right.
Yeah, yeah,
You
that
did say it
I
right.
felt like my jersey comes out when I say his name.
Yeah, it was Staunton. So like caught.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's Staunton. And
Okay.
his name came to be, and I said this when I did the little release party from the book. A guy I had been seeing at the time when I was really working on it, we broke up, and I was very angry, not because he did anything so terrible, but part of the reason we broke up is because he wanted to move away from this area, and he wanted to move to a place called oh god, now I'm going to mispronounce it because it's not actually, yes, Staunton. And so I was so angry that I named it after the place he wanted to move to. But like I said in the release party video, it's not about him. He was actually a good guy. I was just so angry at where he wanted to move because it was like an hour and a half away, and I was like,
Funny.
I don't know. I no.
Well, it's a good name. I when when you read a book, sometimes there's usually I feel like not a pronunciation guide, and
Yes.
you say the name or you make a placeholder for the name in the entire book, and then you hear people talk about it, and you're like, that's how you say the name.
Yes. And you know what? I've heard that. I paid attention to feedback from people talking about not enough authors including pronunciation guides in their books, and then you get that confusion, and it does become frustrating. So I went through and I had my editor go through, and I was like, whatever name of a place or a person that you struggle with, tell me so that I can tell you exactly how I envisioned it in my mind.
Nice. And the last thing about the beginning of the book, before we even get into the book, the trigger warning, which I think it's nice. I feel like I don't know, everyone now is like trying to both maybe not everyone anymore, but was trying to be politically correct and trying to be conscience of other people reading the book.
Mhm.
So the trigger warning to me was just kind of like a nice to show you as an author actually caring about your readers and like showing that you care and you're thinking about them before they even get into the book, which I just think was nice.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and it's
That's
some of those things,
it.
I read a lot of books that have trigger warning lists, and I appreciate them as well. I've yet to come across one that has made me say, I don't know if I can read this, but it doesn't mean that it'll never happen. And I just kept it very basic. It's just a little heads up. You will encounter these 4 or 5 things in the book. You make the decision if you want to read as far as you can and start reading. I just prefer to give people that option.
Yeah. Okay. The next three things are quotes, and I haven't bought like a physical book in a while, so it was nice that I get to like underline and highlight things. I always have to remind myself not to when it's not my book. Um, so the first quote, it's on page 74, and Jack says it. I'm going to read it, so don't worry.
Oh, okay.
Um, Lily's talking to Jack, and they're talking about the witch. And it says, Jack looks at her quizzically. The world's witches have immense power and are tasked with maintaining the delicate balance of life. What we know is things like good and evil, life and death, rain and drought, peace and war, they're all tied together, tragic as that may be. They answer to no one, and their importance should not be taken lightly. I just thought that was like the three quotes that I was drawn to are ones that like I just liked, but also that felt very relevant to like stuff now. And I feel like
Mhm.
kind of will always be relevant, but I just kind of I don't know. I don't have a question. I just wanted to tell you I like it.
I appreciate it. When I was writing that particular scene, Lily's up until that point, her only encounter with a witch has been with what she perceives to be a bad witch, and it is a witch who has been corrupted. Um, and I wanted to make it clear to her as well as the reader that that was never supposed to be the intention. So they have decided to go on this quest to uncover the memories that were taken from her, and as she's talking to Jack, and it becomes very much or he becomes very much aware that she has had this experience, he just wants to provide that little bit of insight to her, saying like, I understand this is your experience, this is what the witches are supposed to be, and just kind of like let her know, it's all about maintaining the balance of life. And like, I did draw some inspiration from that, the circle of life and stuff like that, but also just letting people know, if we're keeping balance in the world, as difficult as some things are, right? If you have rain, somewhere there has to be drought. And if you have peace, there has to be war. As much as I hate saying that, that's the quote unquote balance that they are supposed to be responsible for.
Yeah. And that kind of ties me into my second quote on page 95. I believe it's from from Eudora, the witch. Um, she said, as with so many things in life, even the most pure of intentions can be corrupted and destroyed by the influence of man.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes, and that was something else I wanted to make clear as well, right? Because it's one thing for Jack to tell Lily the purpose of the witches. It's another for her to hear it from one of them herself. And so for Eudora to have that moment with Lily as well, to kind of say, I understand. Like, I know what my role is supposed to be and what my sister witches is supposed to be, but also recognize like man can still corrupt things. And I took that from real life. As humans, we are the most destructive thing on the planet, and so I wanted to incorporate that. Even though this is a fictitious world, I did want to incorporate that, like, man can still corrupt magical elements in the world around us.
Yeah, and it's also like I feel like it just ties into life in general, right? It's like whose company do you keep? That's going to
Right.
influence
Right.
everything.
And it's part of the reason too, because when we talk about um, the what man does and to whom and things like that, if you notice, the bad witch doesn't have a name, and I did that on purpose, and I did it because Shrike and Staunton don't care what her name is. They corrupted a witch to do their bidding, and they don't care. And in the moment that Lily interacts with her, she doesn't care, but for a very different reason, right? Her interactions with the bad witch were very traumatic. She wouldn't think to ask this woman her name. And as you can see, there's also a physical effect on the witch of being corrupted, because when we see her through to the end of the story, right, she appears to Lily one way, and it's not until there's that defining final moment for her that you realize what corruption does to the witch's physical body.
Yes. And I will say, just I feel like when you sometimes read something and you draw image in your head, because maybe because she didn't have a name, I just pictured Ursula from The Little Mermaid as like the bad witch.
Gotcha. Yeah. You could picture
Yeah.
Ursula, or a little bit the way I envisioned her is a bit more looking like an old crone, a
Yeah.
stereotypical old crone. We're not talking about a hook-nosed witch, just a very worn old woman. But the reason she is, it's not her actual age, because the way I describe Eudora and the images that I've put out there of Eudora, she should like look like a woman in her 40s, even though the witches are thousands of years old.
Yeah. And my final quote was on page 159, and I believe it's from Shrike. Lily says, "You're a madman." And he goes, "Oh no, darling, I'm calculated. There's a difference." It just kind of is like chilling because I feel
Yeah.
like people that are terrible like that do think there's a difference, or they tell themselves there's a difference to like be okay with their actions. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's just kind of like, ee.
Yeah, and for that, I wanted it to come across that way, because when we think about, like, what was the big quote? What is the definition of madness? Repeating something and overthinking that the end result will change. I took that definition in my mind. I said, that's not what Shrike is doing. But to see what he's doing, our gut reaction is to say, you're a madman. You're crazy. In his mind, he has come up with this entire revenge plot. So why would that be madness? His plot is going exactly to plan. And yes, in his mind, this is not madness. But as the reader and as the characters outside of that, you absolutely recognize it as madness, because it is not just that he is a vengeful man. Um, like, think of his ideas, think of what he's done. Like, it doesn't make sense. But in his mind, it's just pure calculation.
Yeah. I was going to talk about this, but I think I'm going to refrain because I think it is too much of a spoiler. I mean, it definitely is. So we will skip this. I
Okay, if
was
you
going
want
to,
to come back to it, we can, and I can just, depending on what your question is, I can.
so it's way late in the book, but, I mean, we could talk about the theme in general, but well, I'll go back to it. I'll go back to
Okay.
it. I had a question. Does Tessa, um, you could talk about either one or both. Does Tessa have a backstory? Like, how did she end up on Staunton's crew? And I mean, the Bad Witch, you kind of already said, but like, did you in your mind have backstories for both of them or not
So
really?
I didn't. Tessa was more of a necessary character. In the moment, I said someone needs to be responsible for Lily, who is not a soldier and loyal to Shrike or Staunton. And I said, because she is a woman, I was like, realistically, right? If what's going on, Shrike and Staunton would have another woman kind of accompany her. Not like a lady in waiting, but that's how I envisioned it. And so, just out of pure necessity of needing someone for Lily to be able to talk to advance the plot, I had to create someone. And based on what's going in there, they are treating Lily at that point like a lady of high society, which is what she was born into. It's a very specific reason that they're doing it. So I was like, okay, she would have someone assist to bathe her and dress her and, make sure she is all prim and proper the way she was supposed to be, the way she was brought up. And then it also gave it, because a lot of the time, right, Lily was alone and I needed conversation. I didn't want to keep writing Lily's inner thoughts. I wanted her to be able to tell someone something, even though she doesn't tell Tessa a lot, because what's happening to her is extremely traumatic. And as we establish in those chapters where Tessa can see what is happening to Lily. She can see the marks on her body. She knows what Staunton is doing. But she also has no power. And so it's just one of those, it's like the tiniest of emotional crutches for Lily. But in terms of like, how did Tessa get to be on the island, things like that, I did not think that at all. In my mind, I was just like, she's just another kidnapped person that, Staunton and Shrike have put to work.
Hmm.
And then for the bad witch, it was kind of the same thing. I was like, no one is going to care about her backstory. And I could be wrong. People who might read this book might say, I really want to know more about the witches pre Heart of the Corsair. But in the moment, it was just like, all you needed to know is that this being was corrupted. Here's what she's doing. And here are the repercussions of her actions.
And I feel like it could also be too, I mean, I know Wicked came out a long time ago, but now that Wicked is so popular again, the thought of like the Wicked Witch, I think when I was essentially reading the book through, I was like, the bad witch isn't bad. Like we all know that there's a reason, right? There's obviously a
Right.
reason she's bad.
Yeah, that,
Um,
and too, that just because she has been corrupted, right, and she's got two pivotal parts, right? In Lily's memory, when they go back and they see everything that happened, right, the stealing of the original memories, but then the second part when Lily is brought back to Agrigo, to the prison, and there are those moments of torture with Staunton. She provides a healing elixir for nefarious purposes because he wants to be able to do what he wants without really risking Lily's death. Um, but when he's gone, right, there's that moment. There's that moment between them when the witch says, do it for what's inside, right? So she can sense things about Lily and something very specific that's going on, and there's a bit of encouragement in there. And I like to think of the bad witch as being trapped in a situation out of her control. I don't have the backstory of what being corrupted does to her, but like there is still a sliver of morality in her because she does help Lily in that slightest of ways in that moment.
Um, this isn't really a question either. I was writing so many notes when I was reading. On page 206, I just wrote down because I did. I cried when Vane gets to Lily and tells her she's part of the crew. I was like, it was like I was watching it in like a Lifetime movie set type of way. Like I was like, oh, like that's
Yeah.
nice because you knew immediately. I mean, just from the cover and like right when she meets Jack, there's going to be something going on. So the fact that like another person in the crew is like warming up, I was like, oh.
So yeah, to me that was a really important moment. When I was getting to that part of the book, I was like, I really sat down to say, do I want it to be Jack who finds her? Or do I want it to be someone else? And as I let the characters talk to me as I was writing this out, I said it can't be Jack. Jack is going to go the quote unquote wrong way, right? He's going to think Lily is somewhere else in this fort because of who she is. He's not really thinking that she is going to be in one of the cells in the dungeon. And so once I made that decision, I said, well, who's going to find her? Because someone has to. And as the character of Vane developed, especially after that moment on the ship where he is, he still doesn't like Lily, but she has asked him to teach her some self-defense, right? And that moment when he uses her exhaustion against her and slits the shirt open to the point where everyone can see the scars on her back. I wanted him to have that moment of realization. It's not quite so much a I effed up moment, but it tells him there's more to this girl than he originally thought. And so once I established that moment for him, I said, okay, it has to be Vane. They have to have I wouldn't say it's necessarily a moment of reconciliation, but it is a moment between them that you really wouldn't expect to happen. Had I not written it into the story, I don't think anyone would have been surprised. But to advance to ultimately the very end of the book, I said, I need him to not only have this realization, which I do write out, like he's doing this for his captain. He is so loyal to Jack and the life of the pirate and their code that he is going to do whatever. Jack loves this woman. That's all he needs to know now. That is his job, is to get her to safety. And so having that moment between them, I said, as that scene unfolded, I didn't want it to just be that he found her, he unties her, they leave. I needed them to have that brief little conversation and her kind of telling him, because all the last she remembers is he does not like her, is saying, I didn't say anything. And him acknowledging and like giving her that validation. Of course you didn't. You are a member of our crew now. you are the woman Jack, you are the woman my captain loves, and that makes you a member of the crew. And then nothing else really needed to be said in that moment. It was just something that happens that connects them, and then the seriousness of what's happening around them like immediately takes over. It's like, all right, let's get you out of here, type thing.
Hmm. Um, is there a moment in the book you think readers interpret differently from how you imagined it originally? Feel free to pass if you're like, I cannot think of an answer.
Maybe like a little bit more of like, what do you mean by interpret differently?
Um, is there a scene in the book, or maybe, I don't know, the way that you wrote something that you think readers might not misinterpret, but take a different way than maybe you had in
Um,
mind?
I don't think so. I think I laid it out really well for everyone so that so that misinterpretation doesn't happen. The way I write, and in this book I write in present tense because to me, not movies, books play out like movies in my mind,
Mhm.
and so to me that means it's all present tense. And so being able to just carry that through and be very specific of what's happening, I really do feel like does not allow for misinterpretation. Now, obviously, I can be wrong, and if someone perceives something differently than how I intended it, I would love for them to tell me. Like, let's talk about it. Like, because here's what was happening in my head. Here's what you read. I'm not necessarily saying anything is wrong with either side, but I would love to know if someone interpreted something differently than how I meant it.
Yeah. And from the beginning, I was like, oh, it's present. It's like, it's present tense. And for me, I know like when I write, I think I've said this to you in the past. I don't know why, but like maintaining my tense, I feel like I start switching tenses. But like, I was like, present tense is it's very understandable. It's very readable. And it is because you do picture it kind of just playing
Right.
out.
I know not everyone likes it. I've heard that conversation many times, but for me, it's what I like. Now, my next book, my work in progress, I'm going to try to write it in the more traditional style and see how I like it. But if I don't, I'm not going to force it. I will switch it back to present tense because I did notice the same thing when I was writing Corsair. I told myself present tense, and then I'd go back and reread something, and I'd realize I had slipped into past tense because it's very easy to do.
Yeah. I know. I feel like I do that even with short pieces like poetry. I'm like, wait, but it sounds better, but it doesn't make sense.
Right, right.
Yeah. Let's see. One of my other questions. Let's do what role does the setting play in shaping the emotional tone of the story? So, um, I guess you could talk about all like in general or like a specific setting in general.
So for this book, I knew people were going to compare it either to the Caribbean or the Mediterranean, and that was okay with me. This is why it is an extremely low fantasy book. I did not build a whole world. There's no, world map at the beginning. I wanted it to be very easy for people to follow. And so although I referenced this big imaginary fictional empire, right, we don't have the different places. You have the main islands, which are Agrigo, the prison fort, um, Molai, which is the hidden island where Eudora lives, and then Miras, which is the island that Lily is from, that her grandfather founded in the name of a previous emperor. I wanted it to be because when I think about travel, right, we're talking about inspiration from the 1600s of ships. There's no gas, there's no engine. You are relying on sails, you're relying on the wind. And so when it came to the layout, like, yes, I drew a little something for me to visualize where these islands were and how long it would, if you're going 6 knots or whatever, how long it realistically takes, because it helped me pace the story. And so what I did was I was like, if you're going west and you're getting maybe 6 miles an hour on a ship, how long would it take you to get from point A to point B? So originally from Agrigo to Miras, it's about a week. Like in the way I spread out the islands, each one is about a week's distance to make it realistic. And I learned that from a show called Black Sails that I watched to help research some of pirate lore and how they interact, what they're like. And that's when I learned what it takes to actually sail and how they measure their own speed. But I didn't want the world to be so big that you start focusing on other things. I said this story takes place between three islands. That is the containment of this world. I reference, like I said, I reference this bigger empire, but that's not central to the story. And I didn't want to detract from anything that was happening in the story itself. Um, when it comes to the tones of the island, so like um, Agrigo being a prison is literally a fort, military base type thing. Um, Very dark, very dingy, and like I described the prison courtyard where punishments are delivered, how muddy it is because no one cares, and the dankness, and even when Lily talks to Jack about the nights where she was in her cell, what she would smell, and it was like mold, mildew, my own blood, all that kind of stuff. I was like, that is very clear what a Grigo is. Miras, where Lily's from, I kind of made it a more stereotypical island. I did use like Pirates of the Caribbean, where Elizabeth Swann is originally from, as that. It's a port town, and being able to have the fact that it is a commerce center. It's where trading happens, specifically the trading of goods. And so setting that up to be something recognizable for people was very important to me. And then we have Molai, which is a bit more tropical in nature. And the whole idea of balance plays out on Molai when we talked about balance in the world. So like the sand, right? When they are sailing through the invisible barrier into Molai, right? Lily notices the sand on the beach. It's divided by a little river that comes down out of the jungle. Half the sand is black, half the sand is white. And just to keep that visual representation of not only are we talking about a witch maintaining the balance, but when you meet Eudora specifically, she is all about it, right? She is 110%. This is my job. It is about maintaining the balance. And so I wanted Molai to be the visual representation of that. And then it carries through, right? They have to follow the river up to where Eudora lives. The colors of the sand in the river go that whole way. And so it is truly like this black or white. There is no gray area for Eudora. It is good, bad, like however you want to think of it, good and bad. Um, and so I wanted that. And then I also wanted, Molai to be this peaceful place, because when you have balance, you should have peace. And so there's no jungle animals that are inherently dangerous to anyone. It is just a true, I wanted it to feel like a spa, but outside. It is a tranquil place because of who she is and what she does there.
Yeah, it was cool, like when Jack and Lily are there and they like kind of have their own little moment of like peace there, and you kind of forget that they went to go see a witch. It's almost like, yeah, it takes you out of it, which is cool.
Mhm. Which was important to me because that is their defining moment, right? It is where the big admission of feelings happens, and it is where you realize how big of a deal it is, especially for Jack, right? Because they have that moment on the ship, and he pulls away, right? And it upsets her because she doesn't understand and I wanted it very clear that it's not so much that Lily, yes, part of it is she's inexperienced even at 26, but it's because she was born into high society. And I used London high society as the inspiration for that. It's like they do not teach women about desire and those feelings that come along with it. It was like, you are born and bred to do this. You have piano lessons and you host teas and you do art galleries and all this other stuff. They don't teach women about all that stuff. And so that moment on the ship of confusion for her, thinking she did something wrong, I needed him to explain why. And it also gave me the opportunity to present Jack's backstory, because up until that point, although the book is a third person POV, we don't have information on Jack, right? I give a lot of information on Lily, but the purpose of that is because he is trying to figure out who she is and how he can help her before he decides how involved he can be. Because the thing about Jack, right, he's not morally gray. He may not have the best morals, but he definitely has a moral compass. And so when it comes to Lily and helping her, right, originally he has to protect his crew. It's the whole reason he agrees to
Mhm.
help her. He needs to know what memory she's missing, who she is, before they dock anywhere, get off the ship with this high society girl, and then all of a sudden his crew is in trouble. And I have him tell her about that, or not really her, but Mr. Knox, his quartermaster, when they're discussing helping Lily, of like, we need to know who she is before we're in trouble. Shrike is already bad news. He has sent his right hand man Staunton to find this woman. What did she do? And it's in the process of Jack getting to know Lily that he's like, this doesn't make sense. Why are they hunting her down? And so I needed that to be very clear, but also because he recognizes his feelings and they have this moment on Malai together, this is his opportunity to open up. And I had to make sure that happened. And luckily, as I was writing, that whole scene just kind of flowed out of me, of him realizing he is in a safe space. Because I like that in men. I want a man who's not trying to, for my own self, to pretend that he's got it all under control. It is very clear that Jack does not. He's trying, but he himself has a traumatic past. His father was a bastard. Like, his father was not a good guy. And I wanted it to be that he had a good relationship with his mother, and his father took that away. And for him to say to her, for him to say to Lily, like, you are making me think about things that I thought I would never have. I wanted him to have some emotional intelligence and depth. Yes, he's a pirate, but the other thing I wanted to avoid was stereotyping what we think we know about pirates. Um, and to say, like, they have this code, he follows the code. But also, like, he is learning to give in because he never really wanted to be a pirate. It was the life was forced on him. And so it's through this evolving relationship with Lily that he really starts to realize there's another option for him.
Yeah, it like how you said he sticks to the code and you didn't want him to be stereotypical. It's almost like the code gave him permission to just act very practical, like or not practical, but like logical. Everything was like, well, does it make sense that she's on that boat? Like it almost seemed when they first went into Lily, he was making an excuse. Oh, it makes sense. She's a prisoner. Like she
Right.
obviously did something wrong, right? And it's like
Right.
it's almost like he was trying to stick to that narrative so hard because he didn't want to get involved and didn't want to
Right.
deal
He
with
only wants
anything.
Yeah, he only wants to get involved to the degree that he can get rid of her, get her off his ship without drawing attention to him or his crew. Because I have him, say, like, the bureaucrats in this area of the world are already trying to get rid of pirates, get them off the sea. The last thing he needs is trouble from a high society woman. And it is not until the moment where he sees those scars on her back, and they have already had two conversations where he's like, this doesn't make sense. Like, what could this young woman have done to deserve such punishment? And I wanted that to be the first moment where he questions everything. But then I didn't want it to be that, oh, he knows all. He needs to have those deeper conversations with Lily. And so that's why I had, I'm a dialogue person in my books. I like writing conversations. That's why I had them have that very deep conversation at the bow of the ship about what she remembers, what her life was like, but also show readers that he has depth, right? She's telling him about her boring ass life, because even though she was born into it, and I do say, like, she doesn't know better about certain things, she tells him, I'm educated, I read. It may not be what my parents love about me, but I read. I devour every book I can get my hands on. I know certain things about the world. And I wanted it for him to realize she has complex layers. She's not some damsel in distress, and the fact that she was kidnapped and punished the way she was, there's deeper reasons for it.
Is there, which you may have, and maybe we've already heard, is there a character that you felt the most emotionally connected to, like while you were writing the book, or that you wanted to like the most?
Yeah. So honestly, I like Lily the most. She's the FMC, the female main character, and because I gave her layers, um, I liked being able to explore her coming into her own. Right, she has that moment of, I know I have to go home. And I loved writing this moment for her because it's where, right, they have realized they're falling in love. Jack is questioning realistically, what can we do? How can this work? And I wanted her to be able to have that moment to say, I realize I have to go home, right? I need to talk to my parents about what they know about Shrike, why he would have taken me, what he's actually getting out of it, right? Because that's one of the biggest questions. But she tells him, I don't want to stay there. And for me, having that realization as a woman who had a very sheltered life, that realization for her is huge. And you know, he's surprised by it, and I'm hoping readers were surprised by it too. And then he starts to question it, and she basically tells him, no, I've made this decision. You are my life now. I want to be with you, whatever that means. And if that means I go home, figure out what's going on with Shrike, and then leave again, even if that means escaping in the middle of the night and leaving her parents like a note or whatever to be like, sorry, not sorry, but this is not the life I want for myself. That's a huge moment, and a huge break from the society girl she was raised to be, because I made it very clear early on she hated her life, right? She realized who she was, what she was born as, and she is a meal ticket for other men who want the power that her father's governorship offers. And she says that, what you expect me to go back to a life where I'm meant to be silent, bear children, keep a house, host parties, all this other stuff, and I have no interest in that. And so giving her that layer and that realization was really important. And then those moments later on in the book when she does get uh, re-kidnapped, those moments back on Agrigo of what's happening to her this time, bringing her close to the edge of breaking, like very, very close. Like that's why I titled, there was a dual reason for titling one of the chapters Hanging by a Thread. It's not just about what happens in that chapter. I'm not going to say any more than that because that is a big spoiler, but it's also talking about Lily internally, where her mind is at, her emotions, all of it, because that is the first time. It's one thing for us to read the memories and what she decides to tell Jack. It's another to then say, oh, present day, oh, this is bad. You know, like what she's going through is really bad. And putting that mindset out there of Staunton is trying his damnedest to break her. And I wanted it to be very clear to readers just how close she is. But those little moments of resolve, those little moments of resistance and FU type thing, I still wanted that to carry through because you know that she believes this is not the end. Although that those intrusive thoughts, you know, she has that moment that says like, would it be so bad if he actually succeeded in, you know, getting rid of me? Even though realistically she knows he would never do that because, like everyone else, he needs her for who her father is.
Mm-hmm. Was there any part of your writing process that was like super challenging writing this book? I mean, I know you mentioned it was over a 10-year span, so I guess time, but
Well, no, you know, I say it took over 10 years, but it wasn't one of those things where I was consistently working on it for 10 years. I started it, life got in the way. There was probably a 5 or 6 year stretch where I either never touched it or I wrote a sentence in a year or a paragraph because I just kept losing the story. I could not focus on it. I would say the most difficult thing for me to write was the assaults because it's graphic. Um, and I had to think through it so much, look at it so much, evaluate it, its realism, which feels very, very strange and very wrong to say. I had to walk away from writing those scenes so many times because I was just, as a writer, I sometimes envision myself as the character and envisioning myself as Lily during those moments. It was one of those things where I was like, I have to walk away for a bit because the thought of that happening to me was extremely distressing. And it's not something I wanted to do for a long time. So those were probably the most difficult. And then the moment at the end. So I will say, and I'm going to be very careful here, the way the book ends before the epilogue was not how the book was originally going to end. And there was originally no epilogue. And so writing those final moments, and because you've read it, I'll just say it this way, the moments, Jack's deciding factor of calling on Eudora didn't happen originally. And so there was no reversal of fate. And then when I revisited it and the way their story was going, I said, no, it cannot end this. It cannot end this way. Readers are absolutely going to hate me if it
Yes.
ends this way. And part of me was like, all right, bring it on, because not everyone's life is a happily ever after. But I decided that Jack and Lily deserved differently, from how it originally ends. And so that's when I made a decision to do a 180 on the conclusion. And then I decided not only that they deserved the epilogue that we get, because I purposely did not put the epilogue in the table of contents. I wanted it to be a surprise. At this point, the book has been out for almost 7 months. So it's saying that now, I've posted things about it. People have put it in their reviews. It's not going to be a surprise to anyone anymore that there's an epilogue, but you don't know the contents of the epilogue.
Yeah, I don't think that
Um,
ruins anything. I don't know. I was
yeah,
like, does it show that there's an epilogue?
yeah. But a lot of people have said they got to the end of that last chapter and I've thrown the book. I was so mad at you. I screamed. And then it's like you turn the page and you realize, oh, wait, this isn't the end of the story. Oh, please tell me it's going to be different than what Alyssa has just done to
Yeah,
me.
and I mean, I read this in I stayed up really late one night. I don't know. I wasn't even that close to the end, but I just was like, no, I'm not putting it down.
Mm-hmm,
So I was like in that state of mind when you're like reading for so long and it's like you should be in bed and you're like, oh, don't end this way. And then I was like, oh, the epilogue. And I said, oh, the epilogue's not that long, so I can still read this right now. And I was like a lot happier going to sleep. Um,
mm-hmm,
but this is what I was going to talk about before trying not to spoil, which I'll try not to. Um, page 223 is like the last page before the epilogue stuff.
mm-hmm.
Which I also really like how you did the epilogue with your little ellipsi. Um, was like literally the last little piece. I won't read the whole thing, but Lily said she promised to live her life fully, but at this moment she can't imagine keeping that promise. And
Mm-hmm,
so I was thinking, granted, I wrote my little note about that before I turned the page because I was writing my notes in real time with reading.
mm-hmm,
And if it did end that way, I was like thinking about my thoughts were just going to uh having a conversation with you about living a life fully, but in response to a loss. Like when
mm-hmm,
people promise things to loved ones, like on their deathbed or their last words, like, do this for me. And then it's like just the thoughts of like, it sounds so cliche for people to say, like, do this for me or like, do this because I couldn't. And it's like a very heavy thing in my
mm-hmm.
head when I read that line. I was like, that's heavy.
Right.
Like,
And I
thank you,
wanted
Jack.
that. And I wanted that. I wanted that moment of heaviness to sit with the reader, because a lot of us, for who this book is geared for, have experienced death of a loved one, or someone we really care about. And I wanted that moment of heaviness to just settle, and you think, oh my God, this poor girl, everything she's been through, here's yet another thing. Um, and then you turn the page, right? You're having your freak out moment of, oh my God, how can the story end this way? And then you turn the page. And what I enjoyed, whether readers like it or not, was under the ellipses writing, did you think I would end it there, little flower? Because that's not about Jack and Lily. That is a message from me to you, from writer to reader, saying like, did I get you mad at me? Like, turn the page.
I know. I was like, damn, that was like snarky.
Yeah.
Um, well, you already answered that question for me, so we'll go there. But I don't want to ask that. Let's see. If the reader could take one thing from the story into their own lives, do you have something that you hope they would take? A theme, a lesson, whatever.
Yeah. Not everything is as it seems, and no matter how bad things are, do not give up. A lot of us have had traumatic experiences. We wish our lives were different. In pick any myriad of reasons. Um, but a key thing is, as bad as it is, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm not talking about death. I'm just talking about being able to live the life you want. And that is one of the big things. So yes, this is a story of a woman in a fictional fantasy world, high society. None of us have lived that life, but that's not the point. The point is to keep going and to fight for what you want and the life you want and make those decisions as difficult as it is. Look, I sat there and I put it in the book, and yes, Lily says it like it's a definite thing, but the moment she says, even if I have to leave and leave a note, uh, realistically, right? If that had happened the way she thought it would have to, there's no way that her parents wouldn't try to find her. Her father is a governor. He's very close to the emperor. There would be a full on naval assault, not assault, search for his daughter. So she could talk about leaving any note she wants, that this is not the life she wants, and think that she'll get away scot free and go live this life with Jack. The story does not play out that way, but I knew that going into it. But it's just that moment of like, in her mind, she would do this. And if you have those moments in your life, do what you need to do to be able to live the life you want. So like, get rid of the magic. It doesn't have to be a love story, that you're playing out in your head. It could be anything in your life that you just want to be different, and go after it.
Um, is there something that initially sparked your thought for this book? Either a
Uh,
character or the story or I don't.
Honestly, at this point, I don't remember. So the book started very differently from what it ended up. There was a lot more magic. I would have described the original version of the book like a mix between Pirates of the Caribbean and The Little Mermaid, because originally, in my original draft, Lily not only had missing memories, but Shrike had also stolen her voice from her. Um, so that was very like Ursula,
Yeah.
it's the sea witch, and that's the way that inspiration came from. Because, and I wrote this out early on in the book, she would continue to defy him. That's why she got punished. It's why all these other things happened. And the last little bit of defiance she had against him in the beginning was the use of her voice. She could talk back to him. She would hum songs that she had been taught as a girl, anything to keep her humanity in that situation. And so he takes that from her. So when she escapes, she's a mute. The escape is the most important thing to her. So it's like, voice be damned, because the way it's written, the voice comes out of her. Again, very Little Mermaid. He keeps it corked in a vial around his neck so she can see it every day. But it made it very difficult to write the dialogue and the moments between her and Jack, because essentially, he's asking her questions, and as a reader, right, I wrote out what she's thinking her response is.
Mhm.
Like, how does she communicate this to Jack? And it got very, very tedious, and frankly, I got a little bored. And I said, if I'm bored, the reader's going to get bored, because there's no real opportunity for them to speak to each other until they get to Eudora and they go into Lily's mind, where her voice still exists. And so I was like, I can't. This story is not going to work this way. So fantastical, magical moments from The Little Mermaid were certainly of inspiration. But beyond that, I can't tell like where the idea of a pirate came from, because my first two books were contemporary romance. I never thought I'd be writing a romantasy book, and just something flowed out of me originally. And yes, I lost it, but I got the plot back, and was able to write this.
Do you have like a typical writing session, or are you kind of just like writing stuff here, writing stuff there? Like, do you have
I'm a
a
mix.
routine?
So I'm a mix of what they call a plantser. So someone who plans out the story to a degree, but then when I start writing, whatever flows out of me. And so for me, being a plantser is like for my new work in progress, I have a notebook full of every chapter and a couple bullet points of the main plot points I think need to happen to advance the story. But I don't have specific, unless something really came to me of like this character has to say this to another character. It's not so detailed. So when I do sit down to write the new one, I'm just going to have that notebook open and start. All right, here, literally, chapter one, page one, sentence one. Here we go, and see what flows out. If I don't hit every plot point in that notebook, I don't care as long as the story advances.
That makes
And when it comes to actual writing sessions, sometimes I sit down and say, okay, today I'm going to write for 5 hours. But what I've noticed is when I try to force it is when I struggle the most versus if an idea comes to me and I decide to just sit down and write it at that moment, I get so much further.
hmm Um, oh, I can't think of her name now. It's going to escape me, but I'll write it to you later. But there is a famous author. She was on like Oprah a lot. You would know her name if I said it. Jennifer Loudon, I think.
Okay.
She has some like online stuff. She has little courses here and there, but one of her things, and I wrote it down and I'm like, I love that. She says, never write cold. Like if you
Mm,
sit down to write, she goes, before you do that, you could interpret it in different ways. She's like, get up and dance, go work out, go for a walk, go do something, but don't just sit
mhm.
down, don't just like sit down out of nowhere to write, like because it's almost like a forced
Right. Right.
presence.
I know
Yeah.
some people who can do that and it works for them. It just doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Is there something, at least with this book, that told you the book was done? Like that you felt, okay, now I can stop writing it?
Um, yes. So when I had my beta readers come back and tell me that everything made sense, they didn't feel that anything was missing, that the story was advancing at a good pace, I knew it was done. When it came to subject matter, though, once I had made the decision that the story was going to end the way it did, writing the epilogue, I wanted it to be a full on closure for everyone. I did not plan to make this a series, it's a standalone book. While there is enough there, if I wanted to write another one, I could, but I said for right now, this has to be good enough for readers to recognize, okay, this is how the story is ending. And it makes sense. And I got great feedback on that, and people were happy with
Has writing this book changed you as an author at all? Obviously, your first two books were very different style-wise.
it. So I enjoyed dipping my toes in romantasy. I never thought I would, but I really did like it. I think because it's been 10 years, just in general, my writing has matured because I read so many more books. And so I pull from the books that I've read and the way that other writers tell their stories to just be able to tell a more mature storyline. So, like, yes, my FMC is 26 and I barely remember what it's like to be 26, but I also did not live in a gilded cage. So like, you use your imagination. Um, but like the responsibility aspect of Jack's life was actually even slightly more relatable to me because he's my age, and he's just has so many more responsibilities. And so being able to write that and have some more depth to the characters by telling the story in a third person POV, I thought really made a difference for me.
All right. Well, my last three, and then we'll see if anyone has questions for you, but my last three are not about this book anymore, just about you. Do you have a favorite author? I know it's hard to pick one, but
I actually don't. So I appreciate a lot of writing, but I can't sit here and tell people like this is the person that I turn to all the time, whether it be writing style or story. So I do like a lot of different authors. So I do not have one, and I know some people are going to be like, "What?" And it's just not how my brain works.
I know. I'm like, give me like 3 days and I'll come up with a list. Like,
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Like there's a list of authors I absolutely appreciate, but if you were to ask me, are any of them your favorites? The answer is no.
Do you have any advice for anybody working on their first novel? So many people self-publish now, so I feel like it's more accessible than it ever was that people can do it themselves. Do you have
Yes.
any advice?
Take your time. Take your time and don't be afraid to reach out to people. If there's anything I've learned on the 6 months I've been on TikTok, the indie author community, those of us who are in it for the right reasons of the sense of community and helping each other, there are resources for you. One in particular, there's the Indie Author Revolution, who pushes indie author content out there to people. There's something now called the Indie Lantern, which is a resource website for indie authors that has vetted people who know how to do formatting and styling and copywriting and editing, cover designers, all this other stuff. And every single one of them has been vetted because there are people out there that are trying to take advantage of our inexperience, and they have succeeded. And so people are fighting back against that by offering these resources. And network. I cannot say that enough. I have learned so much on my time on TikTok from the indie author community. Never be afraid to reach out to someone and say, I have a question. And I hate when people say this might be a stupid question. There's no stupid question that you can ask it when we're talking about putting your writing out there, especially with the limited resources that indie authors have.
And my last question is, what are you excited to explore in your future books or writing in general? And um do you just really when I guess in your experience so far, are you just writing novels? Are you dabbling in other types of like essays or poetry or anything, or are you strictly books?
I am strictly books, at least for right now. That may change. I've always struggled to write poetry, so I can't imagine myself pursuing that. But I like novels. I love long form storytelling. So being able to write a novel helps me get a full idea out there. And then I move on from there. I have about 6 projects that I've started over the years. And my work in progress is actually one of them. So I'm kind of going back into my catalog to see which stories are speaking to me versus like a net new idea.
Really nice. All right, the final thing I'm going to say is that back to the book. Without saying anything why, I'm just saying I ended up at the end really liking Knox, and I wrote on my notes, Knox is a softie with a little heart emoji. Um, and that's all I'm going to say. Um,
I loved him. I did love writing him. When people ask me to describe Knox, he is Alfred to Jack's Batman a little bit. He is that voice of reason, the father figure Jack never had. I wanted to show a softer side of a pirate, to say like, this is a choice that he made. This is a life he chose for himself. But like Jack, he has a moral compass. And so I absolutely adored writing Knox.
Very nice. Well, I wanted to thank you, and I will open it up if anybody that's on right now has a question. Feel free to type it in the chat box or unmute yourself.
If we wait while we wait to see if anyone has a
Yeah.
question, I just wanted to thank you for hosting this. This was a lot of fun. I can't wait to be able to share this with people, and I really do appreciate it. I'm glad you liked the story so much. It really does mean a lot to me. Indie authors are not in this for the money. We just want to share our work with the world, and the more people who read it and recommend it, the more word spreads and people get their hands on our stories.
And as a fun fact, well, not really a fun fact because it's just a snippet that I learned. So I posted a post the other day on my Facebook page because I know a lot of people recently that have put out books that I'm either close with or have met randomly throughout the years. And another friend, he put out a book of I believe poetry, and it's very much fitting with the times. And he's selling it at Barnes and Noble. He's selling it, I think, basically everywhere but Amazon. And I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I tried requesting your book. I've tried requesting his book from the library to purchase, and
Mm-hmm.
they turned them down. Um, and I had two librarians, one from Wisconsin and one from New Jersey, right back that I'm friends with that wrote, uh, that independent authors are never really even look like if they think that the book is from an independent author, they don't even look at it.
Hmm.
Which is kind of crazy to me. So it is very important, just as a PSA, to like buy the book, share the book, buy it for the library, give it to them because they are more concerned with people knowing about it. And I guess I don't know. I thought that answer was like kind of icky. And didn't really make
Yeah,
any
and
sense.
unfortunately, we're used to it. People are slow to consider indie books because to them they're not professional. Whereas, like I said, we have all these resources of people who have certificates in editing and formatting and can do all these things to help us put out the best product possible. But yeah, indie books struggle. I am noticing that a lot more like mom and pop independent bookstores are willing to consider indie authors. I now have Corsair in 5 independent bookstores, 4 in the US, 1 in Ireland, because they are willing to take a chance on indie authors because they usually do it on consignment. So yes, I'm sending them out for free right now, but the hope is that once they sell, I get a percentage of the profits. Um, and so it seems like the mom and pop shops are really willing to take that. So if you have one in your area, just go in and ask them what their process is. Let any indie authors know what the process is, and then we can always reach out to them to see if they'd be willing to consider our books.
Yeah, and I think the in-person reaching out like from the author is big because
Mm-hmm.
another thing the librarians both told me is that a lot of librarians, I think just because understaffing and they just don't have the time to go through and sift, is that
Yeah.
their automatic thought too is like, oh, it's written by ChatGPT. So they're like, we don't want to look at that book, right? It's all AI written. So like if it's
Yeah.
independent, that's why. And I obviously there are, but yeah, it's unfortunate that that's like kind of their go-to
Yeah, which
thought
isn't fair
process.
because the indie authors I know do not use AI at all. They're actually vehemently against it for writing a book. They against it for editing a book too. I know the big thing is like everyone assumes if they see an M dash in a book, it was written by AI, and that is not the case. The M dash has been around
I'm an
for
M dash
years.
lover.
You're gonna pry it from my cold dead hands. Um, way before the advent of technology. And what I love is people who are showing old books that have M dashes in it. Like this was clearly written in like the 1800s. This technology didn't exist. Let this like argument about the M dash go. Let us have it. We use it. It exists.
Very nice. All right. So I don't see any questions. So I guess we're good. Perhaps I was thorough enough. Um, all right. So that being said, we can close up. So yeah, thank you again for being with us. Like I said, I will post this. I'll give it to you and I'll post it. We'll see where I post it. I'll post it somewhere.
All right.
But yeah, thank you so much. And I look forward to reading the next
Next work.
the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And thank you guys for tuning in. And I will talk to you soon. I appreciate the support. Really, I do.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.